My name is Haley. I'm 36 years old and an immigration attorney in Houston. One stormy afternoon, I rushed to the hospital after receiving a call that my husband Daniel had been in a serious accident on the highway near Baton Rouge. My heart was pounding out of my chest, and my hands were shaking as I signed the family confirmation paperwork. But when the nurse looked at me, then furrowed her brow and asked, "Sorry, which wife are you?" Ah. I stood frozen, as if someone had slapped me across the face. Which wife? I was the only wife he had ever married, the one who had lived with him for 8 years, the one he promised to walk through the pain of losing a child with. So, who was the other one? If there's ever a moment in life that makes you realize your entire world might just be a copy of someone else's story, this was mine. What would you do if you discovered the person you loved most had an entirely separate family? Leave a comment if you've ever been betrayed. Hit like if you believe the truth always finds its way out. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel to hear the full story, because what I'm about to tell you is far worse than a lie. I used to think I was a lucky woman. I lived in a classic red brick house in the western suburbs of Houston. Every morning, I woke up to the sound of birds outside the porch and the smell of fresh coffee Daniel had brewed in the kitchen. He always woke up before me. Always. Meticulous, careful, and punctual. His tie was always neatly knotted, his coffee just strong enough, and his good morning always came with a soft kiss on my forehead. I used to call that happiness. Daniel was the chief financial officer of a major tech corporation headquartered in Houston. He frequently traveled to other states, especially New Orleans. A few trips every month, always under the name of meeting potential clients, attending strategic conferences, dinner with investors. I never doubted him. I had never once doubted him. In my eyes, Daniel was the kind of man so loyal he bordered on boring. Even his meals didn't change, always rye bread and steamed cauliflower unless I was cooking. How could someone like that possibly live a double life? Our marriage looked like a picture-perfect postcard. We had regular vacation summers in Carmel by the sea, winters in Aspen, end-of-year trips to Napa or Charleston. Our friends called us the most stable couple in the group, always together, always hand in hand at every crowded party. But what no one knew was that I had once been pregnant, just once, when I was 30. And I lost the baby at 12 weeks. The pain didn't come from my body, it came from the moment I held that final ultrasound photo. The doctor silently shook his head, and Daniel just gently squeezed my hand and said, "We're enough." I believed those words for years. I believed he didn't want children, that we were whole with just each other, that love didn't need conditions to keep going. Daniel never brought it up again. He never pushed for another checkup, never mentioned doctors or treatments. He simply packed up everything in the baby's room and turned it into a study, as if life had rearranged itself without needing my consent. A few years later, I slowly learned to move on. I threw myself into work, taking on more immigration cases for women trying to protect their children from war, from poverty, from violence. Some nights I came home late, too exhausted to do anything but collapse on the couch and fall asleep there. Daniel always waited, still made tea, still warmed up the fireplace. But one thing started to change: his business trips. At first, just a few days each month. Then a week. And before long, I noticed that every 28 days, Daniel made a round trip to New Orleans, almost like clockwork. I once asked him, "I think your assistant should go. Does your job really require you to be there every single time?" Daniel smiled, eyes glued to his laptop screen. "No one understands investor psychology like I do. Some clients only want to speak directly with the CFO, you know that." I nodded, trusting him the way I always had. I told myself, a man with a stable career and a happy home like his wouldn't cheat. I even texted him reminders to wear a coat when New Orleans weather turned cold, told him to video call if he had time. But slowly, those calls became less frequent. He said meetings ran long, signals were weak, clients dragged him to surprise dinners. I listened, never suspecting a thing. I kept doing the small things: laundering his shirts with his favorite softener scent, scheduling dental appointments, purchasing a new life insurance policy after Daniel said, "Just in case. So you can feel secure." Everything I did came from a place of trust I believed would never be broken. Every now and then, when I folded laundry, I'd notice the scent on the collar of his shirts. Not my perfume, Not his usual post-work scent. Back then, I assumed it was from a taxi, from a boardroom, from a dinner event he passed through. I didn't want to dig deeper. Because digging meant confronting a fear I wasn't ready for that. Just like the time I found a hotel receipt in Daniel's wallet. It was for a place I'd never heard of. Not on any of his usual booking sites. But I didn't say a word. I smiled softly and handed it back, saying, "You probably forgot to give this to accounting." Daniel didn't even flinch. He nodded, slipped the receipt back in, and kissed my forehead like he always did. Now I see his seamless lies were glaring signs. But when you're living in a painting you believe is perfect, you're too afraid to notice the cracks. I believed too deeply, loved too much, feared losing comfort so much that I never dared to dig into anything that might destroy it. I used to tell my colleagues I was lucky to have married a mature and grounded man. I even wrote a blog post about stability in marriage between a successful woman and the supportive man behind her. That post went viral, and I was even invited for a short interview on local radio. I never imagined that while I was in that recording booth, sharing tips on how to keep love alive, more than 500 miles away, my husband was playing the role of someone else's husband with another woman, in another house, beside a child who called him Dad. And the cruelest part was, I still smiled, still believed, still thought I was holding on to a strong marriage. Until that rainy afternoon, when one nurse's quiet question shattered everything I ever believed to be true. The call came at exactly 4:12 in the afternoon, just as I was preparing a file for an immigration court hearing. The screen showed Daniel's name. I smiled, picked up the phone, but the voice on the other end wasn't his. "Excuse me, are you Haley Hamilton?" I stood up. "Yes, I am." "Who's calling?" "We're calling from Ochsner Medical Center in Baton Rouge. Your husband, Mr. Daniel Hamilton, was in a car accident. He's currently in the emergency room." I gripped the edge of my desk. I don't understand. Baton Rouge? Yes, his car flipped due to wet roads. He has chest and leg injuries but is conscious. Can you come as soon as possible? We need a family member to authorize treatment. I don't remember exactly how I left the office. I just know that when I got in the car, my hands were still shaking. Daniel never mentioned Baton Rouge. He said he'd be in New Orleans all week. I'd heard of Ochsner Hospital during a past case, but I never thought I'd one day drive over 4 hours there, carrying a heart that trembled. On the drive, I kept calling him, but there was no answer. I prayed. I tried to calm myself, telling myself maybe it was just a mistake. But a strange, cold intuition pulsed inside me like a leak of icy water through my chest, tightening with every mile. When I arrived, the rain was coming down hard. The parking lot was slick. Ambulance lights casting long reflections on the pale concrete. I walked into the hospital lobby, drenched, clutching my purse. At the reception, I handed over my ID. The attendant nodded, then turned to the nurse on duty. "The second family member for Mr. Hamilton is here." I looked up. "Second? What do you mean?" The nurse glanced at me, slightly confused. "Oh, are you Haley?" I nodded. "His wife." She frowned, checked her clipboard. "Haley or Brooke?" I stood frozen. "Who's Brooke?" The nurse stayed silent for a moment, then looked at me with a trace of sympathy. "I'm sorry, I'm just going by what's in the file. There are 2 women listed as wife. The other one already came in earlier." I couldn't speak. It felt like I had just fallen into a bottomless pit, where every definition I had about marriage, trust, and safety collapsed in an instant. "Where is she?" I asked, my voice dry. "She just stepped outside. Still on this floor. You can visit Mr. Daniel now if you'd like." I didn't answer right away. I turned to look down the hallway, cold white lights casting reflections on bare walls. Hospitals always felt heavy, but it felt like the air itself was suffocating me. I slowly walked toward the emergency room, but when I got close to the door, I froze. A young woman was sitting in a waiting chair, head down, wiping tears from her face. Her blonde hair was slightly messy, denim jacket a bit wrinkled, sneakers soaked from the rain. She was tapping her phone, but when she looked up, our eyes locked. And in that moment, I knew. I didn't have to ask. She stood up, as if to say something, but I turned away and walked straight into the room. Daniel was lying on the bed, one leg in a cast, oxygen tube under his nose. His face pale, forehead bandaged, hands scraped. When he saw me, his eyes widened. Haley. He tried to sit up. I didn't speak. I just stood there, looking at the man who had called me his wife for 8 years. The man who had once placed his hand on my stomach, cried with me when we lost our child, told me we're enough. And now he was lying there between two women who were both called wife. What were you doing in Baton Rouge? I asked. My voice sounded unfamiliar even to me. Daniel swallowed hard, his eyes confused. I had an unexpected meeting. Here? And Brooke just happens to be here too. He closed his eyes, avoiding mine. It's not what you think. I gave a bitter smile. Then tell me. What do I think it is? He said nothing. I took a step back, my stomach churning. Do you have a child? I asked, barely above a whisper. Daniel looked up. Haley. I'm asking if you have a child, Daniel. He looked at me. And then nodded. I turned and walked out of the room, down the long hallway, past the blonde woman standing frozen at the doorway. I didn't look at her. I didn't speak. But inside, I knew one thing. From that moment on, I was no longer a wife. I was an outsider to my own life, one that someone else had rewritten with a script I'd never been given to read. I left the hospital in relentless rain. My soaked hair clung to my face, but I didn't bother to brush it away. I walked through the parking lot like I was sleepwalking, not remembering how I unlocked the car or started the engine. The only thing that felt real was the cold traveling down my spine, from my neck to the fingers gripping the steering wheel. It wasn't the weather. It was the truth I'd just seen. The words I never wanted to hear. Daniel had a child. And another wife. I didn't go back to Houston right away. I booked a hotel near the hospital, using his condition as an excuse, but the truth was, I needed to observe Brooke. I needed to know who that woman was. I needed to understand how Daniel had lived 2 lives for years without me ever knowing. And deep down, I needed to see if what I had just witnessed was real or just a nightmare I hadn't woken up from yet. The next morning, I parked on a side street across from a small housing complex near Perkins Road. She appeared at 7:30 wearing a beige pencil skirt, white blouse, and carrying a canvas tote printed with the logo of a public elementary school. Brooke didn't stand out, an average woman in her mid-30s, petite frame, low ponytail, walking briskly. She held the hand of a little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, with light brown curls, wearing a school uniform and a purple backpack. The girl chatted nonstop, and Brooke bent down, tucked her daughter's hair behind her ear, then opened the car door and helped her in. I couldn't take my eyes off that scene. Because as the little girl climbed into the car, she asked clearly, "Mom, is Dad picking me up from school today?" I let go of my notes as if something inside me had just snapped. Dad. I'd never been called Mom. I never got the chance to hear a child call Daniel Dad until now. But that child wasn't mine. She belonged to the other woman. After 2 days of watching, I had learned a lot. Brooke was a second-grade teacher at Jefferson West Elementary. She had lived in Baton Rouge for at least 8 years, in a 2-bedroom apartment behind a small shopping strip. Neighbors described her as kind, cheerful, involved in local events. No one mentioned Daniel. No one referred to her as single. I started to question everything. If Daniel came here so often, someone had to have seen them together. A married couple can't live for 7 years without leaving a trace. On the 3rd day, I did something I'd never done before. I hired a private investigator. I found a man named Mark Harper, middle-aged, former homicide detective, now working freelance. Our phone call lasted less than 5 minutes. I want to investigate a man named Daniel Hamilton. I need to know if he's really living 2 lives. In Houston, he's my husband. But in Baton Rouge, I just discovered he has a child. Mark didn't ask many questions. He only needed a photo, home address, license plate, and a timeline. I sent everything by email and paid half up front. Inside me, something had both collapsed and awakened. As if the pain no longer crushed me but instead pushed me to rise. Because I didn't need apologies. I needed the truth. A week later, I received Mark's first report. The email came with 8 photos, 14 movement logs, and a copy of Daniel's credit card statements from the past 6 months. I didn't ask how he got them. I just knew they were undeniable. Daniel had lived 2 lives, not for a few months, but for 7 years. He bought a second wedding ring at a small shop in Lafayette. He opened a separate bank account at another institution, transferring money every month to Brooke under family support. He signed as the legal father on Lily's birth certificate. That was back in 2017. The same year he and I vacationed in Seattle, when he claimed he had the flu the entire trip. Daniel had built a parallel life down to every expense, every fake email, every urgent meeting, unexpected event, weekend training. I used to write him good luck cards for his important business trips. Now I held photos of him carrying Lily into an ice cream shop, his hand resting on Brooke's shoulder at a school fair. I thought I would cry. But I didn't. The tears never came. My heart didn't shatter like some soap opera cliché. What I felt instead was hollow, cold, sharp like the edge of a freshly sharpened knife. I used to be a wife who believed home was the safest place. Now I realized I had been the only one keeping that home warm. Daniel came in only when he needed heat, then left without a word. I opened my laptop, created a password-protected folder, saved all the documents, sorted by date, categorized by location, even included old text messages I had backed up from Daniel's phone months ago. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't call to confront him. I just prepared. Because I was no longer the betrayed wife. I was an attorney. And I was preparing to sue with every piece of evidence in my hands. Daniel was still in the hospital, immobilized with his leg in a cast and a minor rib fracture. The doctors said he needed to stay under observation for a few more days, while I was told I could visit my husband anytime I wished. Everyone at the hospital saw me as the legal wife after all. I was listed as his emergency contact, a small detail, but just enough for me to use. Every evening, I visited him with apple juice and his favorite white bread. Daniel still looked uneasy. His eyes would always dodge mine when I asked about work, the accident, or something as simple as, "Why were you in Baton Rouge?" He slipped out of every question like a fish too slick to hold, leaving nothing but vague answers behind. I smiled. I pretended not to know a thing. I asked about his pain, patted his shoulder, said things like, "I just want you to get better and everything else can wait." He listened and seemed relieved. But Daniel had no idea that inside my handbag was a portable hard drive waiting. That night, after he dozed off from painkillers, I unlocked his phone. His fingerprint was still stored in the system. It took 1 second to access. I didn't bother reading the messages right then. I plugged in a cable, connected to the laptop hidden in my bag. The software I installed began auto-extracting everything. Texts, photos, emails, calendar events, banking apps, Apple Wallet accounts, health tracking data, even cloud storage documents. Everything was backed up, sorted and compressed in under 10 minutes. By the time Daniel stirred in his sleep, I had already pulled the cable, shut the laptop, and placed the phone back where it was. I straightened the blanket, sat down beside him like nothing happened. He opened his eyes, groggy. "You're still here?" I smiled, gently rested my hand on his. Where else would I be? The next morning, I returned to Houston and began reviewing the data. The first thing that hit me was the emails, over 100 threads between Daniel and Brooke. Some under their real names, others sent from anonymous addresses. But the writing style, tone, and timestamps matched perfectly. They called each other D and B. Sweet words, soft promises, detailed plans to take Lily to Disneyland that summer, updates on her piano lessons, parent-teacher meetings, every line a record of a life I wasn't part of. Then came the financial trail. Daniel had opened a savings account at a Louisiana bank, specifically a 529 college plan, meant to save for Lily's college tuition. Every month, like clockwork, he transferred $600 from our Houston account into it. Not a missed payment. Like a sacred duty. I paused for a long time at one line item. Fall semester tuition payment, Lily Walker. Not Hamilton. Walker. Brooke's last name. I didn't cry. I just sat there, as if every sound in the world had vanished. All I could hear was the clicking of keys and the endless scroll of evidence flashing before my eyes. I backed everything up in 3 places: the hard drive, a USB, and a new cloud account password known only to me. Then I called my lawyer Diane Harrington, an old college friend now working at a firm that specialized in divorce cases involving financial fraud. Diane didn't ask much. When I told her I suspected my husband had two families, she let out a sigh. "Haley, send me everything. If this is real, we're not just looking at divorce. We're looking at federal marriage law violations." I prepared the case file, numbered every page, screenshotted every message, every statement, every image of Daniel with Brooke and Lily at school events. Diane called it a starter file. I called it the truth. At the same time, I made no changes to my behavior. I returned to the hospital every evening, still brought fruit, still asked the doctors about Daniel's recovery. When he was discharged, I drove him back to Houston, placed a soft pillow behind him, played quiet jazz. I did everything like a caring wife would. Like someone who knew nothing. Daniel sat in the back seat, looking out the window, voice low. "I thought you'd be angry. That you'd leave." I replied casually. "What would make you think I'd be angry?" He paused for a second, then shook his head. "I don't know. Probably just tired." I smiled, turned onto the highway ramp. "Then get some rest. We've got a long road ahead." The very next day, I started installing hidden cameras in the house, a tiny device in a wall socket, another placed between the bookshelf, lens angled toward the living room. Everything was controlled remotely from my phone. Daniel didn't know. And I didn't give him reason to. I began documenting his every move. What time he left the house, how often he used his phone, how many times he unlocked his private laptop, the odd breaks in screen time when his phone would go dark, then light up again. I missed nothing. Every night, I cooked like usual. A warm meal, grilled meat, fresh salad. I served his favorites. Gently asked about his plans to return to work, how he felt physically. Daniel slowly slipped back into his confident rhythm, like the storm had passed. He didn't know I was recording the entire process. Because when all was said and done, I didn't just want to walk away. I wanted him to face the truth. In the light. In front of everyone. With nowhere to hide. No lie left to cling to. No one left on his side. I chose a quiet Saturday afternoon to host the gathering in our backyard. The April sunlight brushed softly across the lavender bushes I'd planted last year. The wooden tables were clean, white linens perfectly laid, and in the center of each table yellow tulips, Daniel's favorite. I wanted everything to look perfect. Just like the perfect double life he once crafted. I sent invitations to a limited list, Daniel's close friends, co-workers, a few old family friends, and most importantly his mother, Helen. A sharp woman who had once declared at our wedding, "Daniel always chooses right." I remembered every word. Daniel seemed surprised when he saw the preparations. "You didn't have to do all this. I just want to rest." I placed a hand on his shoulder, smiled warmly. "You survived an accident. Not everyone gets a second chance to celebrate that." He looked at me, hesitated, then nodded. "Well, thank you." I planned every detail carefully. Even hired a private chef to serve appetizers and honey-glazed ribs. But the highlight of the event wasn't the food or the wine, it was the video I had prepared. I introduced it as a sentimental gift. "A little tribute for the man who made it home," I said, once everyone was seated and the evening light had begun casting shadows across the white fence. I connected the projector to my laptop. The screen lit up with the words, 17 years, moments to remember. The first images were of our wedding. Daniel, beaming in a deep blue tuxedo. Me, in a flowing white dress beside him. Then short clips: our Santa Barbara trip, his 40th birthday party, a picnic with friends in Austin. Everyone smiled. A few chuckles rippled through the yard. I let them enjoy that warm nostalgia for exactly 3 minutes. Then, the footage shifted. The colors dulled. A clear recording from a security camera filled the screen, timestamped at the top. Daniel stepping out of a small apartment in Baton Rouge, holding Lily's hand. The girls skipped, laughing, calling, "Daddy, race me." Daniel laughed, lifted her off the ground. Laughter vanished. I didn't look at anyone as the video played on. Daniel opening the car door for Brooke, kissing her cheek without thinking. Then they entered a restaurant together, ordered food, fed Lily. A perfect family scene, just not mine. I heard the gentle sound of a glass being set down, the soft rustle of a blazer shifting in a chair, and then, silence. Next came the footage of Daniel at the elementary school ceremony. He stood in the middle of the schoolyard, Brooke beside him, as Lily accepted the award for Most Courteous Student of the Month. The announcer's voice rang out clearly. "Let's congratulate Lily Walker," along with her parents, Mr. Daniel Hamilton and Miss Brooke Walker. Daniel's mother had just raised her wine glass. Her hand froze midair. She turned to me, her face pale as paper. A guest seated at the table to the left stammered, Is this real?" Daniel stood up. The wine glass in his hand dropped onto the stone tiles with a sharp, echoing crash, like a gunshot. He stumbled toward me, panic written all over him, his voice rising in desperation to drown out the video. "Haley, what are you doing? Have you lost your mind?" I didn't move. My eyes stayed locked on the screen. The final video appeared. Daniel signing a document in a hospital administrative office. The heading at the top: Birth Certificate. Lily Marie Walker. Section: Father, Daniel Hamilton. The entire backyard went dead silent. No one said a word. I turned and looked Daniel straight in the eyes. "You've lived here with me and lived in Baton Rouge with them for 7 years. You had a child. And I knew nothing. Not until the nurse asked, 'Which wife?'" Daniel stumbled back, his face drained of color. "It's not what you think, Brooke. She's just—" I cut him off, my voice not loud, but clear enough for every guest to hear. "Just a woman you had a child with. Signed her birth certificate. Paid for her education. Added her to your insurance and called your wife. Just someone you lived with when you told me you were attending a finance conference." His breathing turned ragged. His eyes darted around, searching for somewhere, anywhere to hide. But no one came to his defense. Not a single voice. His mother stood up abruptly, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Daniel, what have you done?" Daniel mumbled, hands trembling, no defense left in him. I stepped closer, leaned in just enough so only he could hear. "You may have betrayed me, but you won't escape the truth. Because I just made it shine under the lights, in front of people who've known you your whole life." Then I turned to the guests and offered a faint, steady smile. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate. The party ends here." And I walked straight into the house, leaving behind whispers, a man on his knees in the grass, and a crumbling double life finally exposed to its own reflection. 2 days after the party, I went to Baton Rouge again. Not as a betrayed wife searching for answers. This time, I went as a woman who needed to confront things face to face, to hear it with her own ears. Not from voice memos or detective reports. I didn't announce my visit. I waited until Brooke finished her class at Jefferson West Elementary. She walked out through the faculty gate, holding a handbag, her hair in a neat bun, face bare of makeup. She looked tired, but still carried herself with the tidy composure of a dedicated teacher. I stepped out of the car, standing right at the edge of the schoolyard. Brooke froze when she saw me. For a few seconds, her eyes narrowed, not from surprise, but from realization. She knew why I was there. "I figured you'd come," she said softly, like a greeting. There was no panic in her voice. "Do you have a few minutes?" I asked, keeping my tone even. Brooke glanced around the schoolyard, then nodded. "There's a cafe 2 blocks down. It's quieter there." We sat in a secluded corner far from the door. I ordered mint tea. She ordered a cappuccino. For the first 2 minutes, no one said a word. I looked her straight in the eye. "I think I should start by saying I'm not here to cause a scene," I said. "I just want to understand." Brooke took a small sip of coffee and gently set the cup down. "You think I'm the victim, don't you?" I stayed silent. "You thought I had no idea about you this whole time?" She looked up. "I knew. 3 years ago." I leaned back slightly. My chest tightened. "You knew. And still kept living like that." "At first I thought you were an ex," he said. "Haley is someone I haven't sorted out legally yet. I had just given birth to Lily. I didn't want to fight. I believed him. Or maybe I wanted to." Her voice grew raspy. "When did you find out the truth?" "When Lily was 3. I found airline receipts. He was flying to Houston more often than I thought. So I hired someone to follow him. She gave a bitter laugh. Just like you did. And you accepted that? I asked, unable to hide the tremble in my voice. Brooke looked me dead in the eye, no trace of guilt. I had a child. Daniel supported us. Lily went to a good school. We lived in a nice home. You can call me selfish, complicit, but I once stood at the crossroads, expose everything and lose it all. Or stay silent and keep a piece of peace for my daughter. I stared at her, unsure whether to feel anger or pity. I didn't need him to love me like in the movies. I just needed him to show up a few days a month. And you? You thought he chose you? You lived with him and didn't know. I knew. And I let it continue. I pulled out a backup phone, tapped the recorder. It began recording in silence. I didn't speak. I let her talk. Do you know what it feels like to be second for 7 years? Do you know how many nights I wanted to pack and leave, but then thought of Lily's tuition, the nights she had a fever and no one was there? Daniel at least called. Sent money. Said, I'm trying. And you slept next to him, lived with him, but didn't even know who he really was. I still said nothing. My eyes never left her face. I'm not proud to say this, she went on. But you should know Daniel wasn't forced into anything. He chose the double life. He chose secrecy. He chose to lie to both of us. And I chose silence. Because silence was easier. I sat still, head full of imagined knocking, as if each word she spoke was another knock on the hollow walls of a rotted marriage. I whispered, I don't know what's worse, that he deceived 2 women, or that one of them knew, and chose to keep living in it. Brooke nodded, her eyes no longer on me. I understand. You can hate me. But the truth is, I don't need your forgiveness. I leaned back, stopped the recording. I had what I needed. Every word, every detail. I stood up, paid for both of us. Before I left, I looked at her one last time. I don't know what you'll choose after today. But next time, if a man lies to someone for you, remember someday, he'll lie to you for someone else. Brooke didn't respond. She only looked out the window, watching children ride their bikes in the soft golden light of late afternoon. I stepped out of the cafe, head held high. Not because I'd won, but because I had faced the truth without bowing to it. I filed for divorce on a Monday morning with light rain, nearly 8 weeks after collecting enough evidence. The reason was clearly stated on the papers: federal marital fraud, violation of monogamy laws, request for unequal division of assets due to gross misconduct within the marriage. Attorney Diane Harrington's office submitted the full file to Harris County Court. Within 48 hours of the petition being accepted, the name Daniel Hamilton appeared on the front page of the legal and financial section of the local paper. Daniel wasn't just the chief financial officer of a publicly traded tech company, he had also once served as the honorary spokesperson for the Strong Families Initiative, a state-funded campaign in Texas 3 years ago. The irony of it all made it impossible for the media to ignore. On the first day of the hearing, I walked into the courtroom in a dark navy suit, hair pulled neatly into a bun, minimal makeup. I didn't need to look strong. The truth was strong enough. Daniel sat across from me beside his personal attorney. He avoided my gaze the entire morning, keeping his eyes locked on the paperwork or whispering briefly to his legal counsel. Brooke wasn't present in the courtroom, but her name appeared right at the top of the case file. Involved party, civil accomplice. Presiding over the case was Judge Jennifer Morales, a woman in her early 60s with sharp eyes that could slice through pretense like a paring knife. She opened the hearing with a firm voice. Today's session will examine the divorce petition filed by Mrs. Haley Hamilton against Mr. Daniel Hamilton, with the purpose of reviewing evidence related to potential criminal fraud and violations of Texas and federal marriage laws. The air in the room grew instantly heavy. Reporters sat in the back row, pens ready, recorders blinking red. Diane rose to speak, beginning with an outline of the legal marriage timeline between Daniel and me, our years of cohabitation, and assets acquired both before and during the marriage. Then she moved on to the submitted evidence: a copy of Lily's birth certificate listing Daniel Hamilton as the father, video footage of Daniel and Brooke living as husband and wife in Baton Rouge, and records of a private bank account used to support a second household over the course of 7 years. The judge flipped through each document in silence, pausing for a long time on the video clips, especially the one where Brooke said, "I knew she was the legal wife." I stayed quiet because Daniel still supported us. Diane looked straight at the bench. "Your Honor, this is not simply a case of infidelity. This is a blatant violation of federal monogamy laws." The defendant maintained 2 marital lives simultaneously, created separate financial accounts, transferred monthly assets, and signed legal documents with a third party while still legally bound to the plaintiff. These actions constitute civil fraud and potentially criminal misconduct. I was then asked to stand. Judge Morales addressed me directly. "Do you have evidence that Mr. Hamilton knowingly broke the law when signing documents concerning the child and the second woman?" I answered calmly. "I have copies of emails he sent to the school, the insurance provider, and the bank, all signed Daniel Hamilton, guardian, father for Lily Walker. During that time, we were neither divorced nor legally separated." The court ordered the video of Brooke's statement to be replayed. All murmurs ceased as her voice filled the room. "I thought Haley was the mistress. Then I found out. But I stayed. Because he took care of me and the child." Daniel's attorney stood to argue back, attempting to frame the situation as an emotional misstep. He claimed Daniel never intended to defraud or financially harm me. That joint assets remained intact, and that Daniel had simply lost his way due to emotional pressure and familial obligation. Judge Morales interrupted him coldly. "No one loses their way for 7 years while setting up a college fund for a child, paying monthly health insurance, signing as legal father, and maintaining 2 relationships in 2 different states. Don't insult the court's intelligence." Daniel lowered his head. His shoulders shook slightly. For the first time in my life, I saw him, with no words left to defend himself. The court recessed for 20 minutes. When we returned, Judge Morales delivered the ruling. "After full review of the evidence, the court finds that Mr. Daniel Hamilton committed marital fraud and violated the legally binding principle of monogamy throughout the duration of the marriage. Mrs. Haley Hamilton is entitled to an 80-20 division of assets in her favor, including all real estate, corporate shares, and joint retirement accounts. Additionally, this file will be forwarded to the federal prosecutor's office for review of potential criminal charges relating to falsified public documents." Daniel didn't respond. It was as if he had already unraveled the moment the second video began to play. As for Brooke, though absent from the courtroom, she was summoned later for further investigation on the grounds of potential civil document fraud. Her willing participation in signing medical, birth, and banking records could constitute aiding financial and marital deception. I sat in the plaintiff's seat, listening to the verdict read aloud. I felt neither triumph nor sorrow. Just the steady breath of someone who had finally stepped out of the shadows and into the light. When the hearing ended, Daniel left the courtroom first. He never looked back. He didn't say a word. And I didn't need him to. Because by then, I wasn't seeking justice for a broken heart. I was standing on the other side with the truth as my victory. I returned to our old house on a gray morning. The case was closed, judgment declared, and Daniel hadn't been back since the day he was ordered to leave. Diane had suggested I hire someone to clean the place out, but I declined. Some things, you have to touch yourself to truly understand what shape they've taken. I walked down the hallway, running my fingers along the surface of the bookshelf he used to love. Everything was still exactly as he'd left it. The gray sweater lay folded neatly on the leather chair by the fireplace. His old wristwatch rested quietly in its wooden tray beside the bed. I didn't touch them. I headed straight for his office, the one room I had never thoroughly searched. The space was unsettlingly neat. Daniel was the kind of man who aligned every piece of paper at a perfect angle. No dust, no clutter. But in the bottom drawer of the black steel cabinet, I found a small set of keys I had never seen before. Using them, I unlocked a concealed wall safe hidden behind a landscape painting. Inside were only a few items. Several thick envelopes of financial paperwork, a worn leather journal, a small dark brown velvet box, and a single unsealed envelope, revealing half of a handwritten note in his familiar cursive. I picked up the letter slowly. My heart pounded, not because I was hoping for an explanation, but because I feared what I thought I understood might be flipped upside down again. Daniel's handwriting was neat, rounded, like the birthday cards he always wrote me. But this time, there were no wishes. No decorations. Haley, I don't know who I truly love. Some days I think it's you. Other days I think it's Brooke. But there's one thing I can't deny: you're the only person who ever made me feel small. Not because you're strong, but because you saw straight through me. I didn't keep this from you to betray you. I kept it because I feared you wouldn't forgive me. About the pregnancy. The truth isn't what you think. I received the medical report you didn't miscarry. You're still able to have children. It was just that the fetus wasn't developing properly. The doctor said it needed to be terminated to protect your health. I didn't tell you because you were already in too much pain. Because I was a coward. I thought if you never knew, you wouldn't blame yourself. Wouldn't carry the guilt. I'm sorry for everything I did wrong. If you're reading this, maybe it's already too late. But I want you to know I never stopped loving you. I was just too weak to hold on to what was right. Daniel. I didn't let go of the page. I read it again. Then again. I checked the envelope for a date, a stamp, anything that might indicate when it was written. Nothing. It sat there, like a confession locked away for years, never brave enough to face the light. Next to it sat the velvet box. I opened it. Inside was an ultrasound image, no name listed. But on the back, written in ballpoint pen, 12 weeks, final result, confirmation needed for D&C. I froze. I remember that morning clearly. Daniel was the one who took me to the clinic. I hadn't even seen the doctor yet when they wheeled me into a minor procedure room. When I woke up, the only thing I knew was this: I had lost the baby. No one showed me any results. No one gave a full explanation. And Daniel said, the doctor said the fetus wasn't viable, so they took care of it for you, spared you the pain. And I believed him. I lived for years believing it was my fault. I cried thinking my body wasn't good enough to be a mother. I turned down my sister's offer to adopt. I turned down everything, because I thought I didn't deserve a family. And now I know that wasn't the truth. Daniel had kept all the records. He knew. And he chose to hide them. Not for me. For himself. I sat on the floor, clutching the small ultrasound print that felt as fragile as a napkin. The old questions came rushing back, layer by layer. If I had known earlier, would things have turned out differently? Would I have held on to my belief in myself? Or was it Daniel's fear of losing control that led him to twist even my grief just to take away my ability to choose? I held the letter and walked straight to the bathroom. I stared at myself in the mirror, a woman who once believed in love so much she turned herself into someone else's shadow. I didn't cry. But I looked into my own eyes and I knew I wasn't broken. I had been deceived. And clarity finally returned, sharper than ever. I scheduled a meeting with Dr. Monroe, the OBGYN who had monitored my only pregnancy 6 years ago, at a small private clinic on the west side of Houston. She had retired 2 years ago. But when I called and explained I needed answers about something from the past, she agreed to see me, maybe because my voice was steady enough to tell her this wasn't just a medical inquiry anymore. It was about a truth that had been stolen. The old clinic was as quiet and orderly as I remembered. Dr. Monroe still wore her short, tidy haircut, slim-framed glasses, and carried the same sharp but not unkind presence she always had. She unlocked the medical records with a personal key and pulled out a time-worn folder. I sat still, barely breathing, not daring to look over until she finally spoke. Haley, are you sure you want to hear this? I nodded. She let out a slow breath and placed a printed test result on the table. The fetus didn't pass away naturally. Development was slow, yes. But there was still a chance. It wasn't life-threatening for you, it just required special monitoring. According to protocol, we would normally discuss options with the patient. I stared at the paper in front of me, lines of ICD codes, beta HCG levels, and clear, concise clinical notes. Recommend extended monitoring. No immediate intervention necessary unless patient opts. But you didn't tell me that, I whispered. Dr. Monroe removed her glasses, her eyes filled with regret. Because your husband at the time, Daniel, asked to speak to me privately. He said you were too emotional, had been crying for hours, and didn't want medical details. He said I should proceed directly with the intervention and keep it simple. Because Haley already agreed. I felt the air vanish from my lungs. I never agreed. I never signed anything. You did. Sign, she said, gently reopening the file. But it was a standard minor surgery consent form, not a document confirming fetal status. Maybe, you didn't read it fully at the time. And we trusted him too easily. I looked at her, trembling. Why didn't you check with me again in the procedure room? You were already under light sedation. The whole process moved fast. I was wrong. And I'm sorry. I didn't respond. I just stared at the wall behind her desk, where a pencil sketch of two hands cradling a tiny life hung. A picture I once thought symbolized hope. Now it looked like a reminder of something lost beyond measure. I left the clinic around noon. The sun was harsh, but it couldn't burn away the ache in my chest. For 6 years I had lived as a woman who believed she was damaged. I turned away love, rejected adoption, and even refused myself because of a truth buried under someone else's control, wrapped in the clean image of a man I once loved. Daniel hadn't just betrayed me with kisses meant for someone else. He had stolen from me something irreplaceable, the belief that I could be a mother if I chose to be. I didn't cry then. The pain was too deep to turn into tears. I drove aimlessly around Memorial Park, then stopped at a dusty lot by the lake. I stepped out into the bright sun, and didn't feel warmth. Just emptiness. When I called Diane to update her, she stayed silent on the other end for a long time. Then said softly, "Haley, you've been through too much. But if you still want to become a mother, I know a good doctor in Austin. She's helped many single women go through IVF. They won't take the choice out of your hands." I thanked her. And I went. 3 weeks later, I had my first consultation with Dr. Rowe, a reproductive specialist. In a small, cozy clinic free from cold intercoms and harsh lighting, I told her everything. I left nothing out. She didn't interrupt. She just listened, then said in a calm, confident voice, "Physically, Haley, you can still carry a child. The odds aren't high, but they're not hopeless. More important than the statistics, this is your decision. No one else's." I pressed my lips together. It felt like something inside me had just been stitched back together with one careful, steady thread. I began pre-IVF testing, hormone panels, scopes, ultrasounds. Every morning I gave myself hormone injections in the bathroom mirror, watching the pale reflection of myself grow braver. No Daniel. No one standing behind me to praise or stop me. Just me and my choice. One morning, as sunlight poured through the curtains, I got a call from the clinic. The nurse's voice was warm and gentle. "Congratulations, Haley. The embryo has formed. We'll do the transfer next week. All your numbers look good." I didn't answer right away. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone clutched tightly in my hand. Then I exhaled for the first time on this long road with a real smile spreading across my face. Not because I was certain I'd become a mother, but because I hadn't let anyone else decide that for me. I moved to Seattle at the end of March, right as the plum blossoms were painting Green Lake white. The city was wetter than Houston, colder, and with far less sunshine, but somehow, it felt easier to breathe. Maybe it was because I arrived as someone different, not Haley, the betrayed wife, not the woman who endured in silence, but a lawyer standing tall on the wounds she had once carried. I rented a small apartment in Capitol Hill, on the 3rd floor, with a window that overlooked a cozy cafe always lit in warm yellow, soft jazz humming through its windows every morning. At first I had planned to find a quieter place, but the streetcar sounds and night noises of the city made me feel a little less alone. The law office I started, Whitmore Advocacy for Women, was on the 2nd floor of an early 20th century red brick building with tall glass windows. I didn't choose it for its prestige, but because it stood beside a community center for single mothers and immigrant women. I knew they were the first to need a legal voice that was honest. On the day of the office's grand opening, I was so busy I forgot to eat breakfast. New colleagues, old friends from Houston sent flowers, and even a few women who had once been my clients showed up, some carrying children in their arms, placing their hands on my shoulder and saying, "Thank you. I wouldn't have made it this far without you." I was moved, but I didn't cry. I simply smiled, looking up at the office sign above the door. Attorney Haley Whitmore, defending women through law and trust. As the opening event was winding down, a man walked in. He was tall, calm, light brown hair, wearing a simple navy button-down. His eyes lingered on me a little longer than expected. I was about to walk over and shake his hand when he spoke first, his voice steady and deep. "I'm Marcus Kane. You might not remember me, but I used to be one of Daniel's close friends." I froze. His name pulled old memories to the surface: family dinners, company parties where Daniel and Marcus stood shoulder to shoulder like brothers. "I remember," I said, keeping my tone composed. He nodded, offering a slight smile. "I didn't come here to bring up the past. I just wanted to thank you. Because of last year's trial, a lot of people in the company finally had the courage to speak out against Daniel. We all knew something was wrong with him, but no one dared challenge a powerful CFO. After the truth came out, deeper investigations revealed he had falsified financial records for at least 4 years. I was one of the people nearly trapped in the fallout, almost held jointly responsible. But because you didn't stay silent, I was freed." I studied him for a moment. Marcus didn't look like a man fresh out of chaos, but like someone who had learned how to survive it. His eyes no longer sparkled like they used to, but there was something deeper now, quiet and steady. "I just did what I had to do," I said softly. He smiled. "Not everyone has the courage to do that." I nodded, ready to say goodbye, when he hesitated. "I know this might sound forward, but if you're free this Saturday afternoon, there's a quiet little cafe in Ballard. They serve hand-roasted Ethiopian coffee and have a bookshelf where guests can read." I smiled. Not avoiding, not overthinking. No promises. No expectations? Just a cup of coffee, he said, between two people who once thought they'd never trust again. I nodded. "Saturday afternoon, 3 o'clock. Send me the address." After Marcus left, I walked back into the room where a small crib sat in the brightest corner. My little boy was sleeping, his tiny face calm and still. I stepped closer, brushing his soft hair with my fingers, whispering, "Mommy's still learning how to trust again, you know? But I believe in you. And I believe in tomorrow." I placed a small card beside him. On it was the message I had written before the office opened. "If one day you ask why I never gave up, I'll tell you. Because I was once deceived, once hurt so badly I couldn't breathe, but I stood back up. And I chose to love you with truth, without conditions, without lies, without hiding." The breeze outside rustled past the window, carrying the scent of wet grass and the soft tinkling of wind chimes. I looked out at this new city, not starting over from what I had lost, but from what I was building. No more Daniel, no more late apologies, no more decisions made for me. Now I am Haley, a mother, a survivor, and someone rewriting her story, line by line, with her own hands. What do you think about my journey? If it were you faced with such a painful truth, betrayed, stripped of your right to be a mother, then forced to start over alone, would you choose forgiveness, or would you walk forward without looking back? Everyone defines happiness differently. Some stay silent to preserve a home. Others walk away to protect themselves. But for me, the biggest lesson didn't come from the man who betrayed me. It came from the moment I dared to face my pain and stopped letting others define my worth. If you've ever felt overlooked in your own home, if you've ever swallowed your anger in silence just to keep someone close, then this story is for you. And if you've ever thought you couldn't move forward alone, look at me. No one has to be strong from the start, but everyone has the right to choose strength when the moment comes. Share your thoughts below. I want to hear your story, what you've been through, what you still carry inside. Maybe your voice will help someone else find theirs. And if you want to keep listening to real, powerful stories that reveal both the wounds and the healing within families, don't forget to follow this channel. Because behind every silent door, there's a story waiting to be told.